The trapezius lies superficially along the upper back and neck. Its broad, thin fibers blanket the shoulders, attaching to the occiput at the base of the head, the lateral clavicle, the scapula, and the spinous processes of the thoracic vertebrae.
Chances are, if you've ever given someone a shoulder rub, you're a little familiar with this muscle. So let's give it a shot. First thing I'm going to do is locate the bony landmarks that really isolate the tendinous attachments of this muscle. And the first one is going to be at the base of the head, the superior nuchal line, right here. Now, I can see this easily because my partner is bald, but even if he weren't, I can pretty much draw a line straight across the top of the ears, and that's going to be the location of that superior nuchal line. And there we have a very pronounced external occipital protuberance. So this is going to be one bony landmark that'll be important for the upper fibers of the trapezius. Then we can come down to the scapula and clavicle and palpate and locate the spine of the scapula here just off the top of the shoulder. Notice I'm not poking in with my finger. No, I'm just going to use the broad finger pads, and there's that superficial line. And if I follow it out to the acromion at the cap of the shoulder, there's that bald surface right there. And then if I follow the acromion over to the lateral portion of the clavicle, there. And that J will be an important attachment site for the upper and middle fibers of the trapezius. And then finally, the last bony landmark, or landmarks, will be the spinous processes of C7 all the way down to T12. Now, there's a lot of spinous processes, so how do we find those? Well, luckily, the spinous process of C7 is right at the base of the neck and is more prominent than the surrounding landmarks. And sure enough, there's his C7. And now it's really just a matter of counting down. T1, and there's a little gap, and then T2, and a little gap, there's T3. You just walk your fingers all the way down systematically as you find all of these spinous processes. And it's really worth the time to actually do this because you notice that not all spinous processes are lined up as maybe they should be. And some are a little larger than others. And there we are down to T12. So we've got the spinous processes of C7 to T12, the clavicle and the spine of the scapula, and the superior nuchal line. Those are three landmarks that are going to help isolate the trapezius. So let's get our hands on some of this. Let's first find the upper fibers of the trapezius. I'm going to just bring my partner's arm off the side of the table, and I'm just going to grasp some of this tissue here on the top of the neck and the top of the shoulder. And this flap of muscle tissue right here is the trapezius. Now, notice I'm not doing this. Well, this is the rhomboids, the trap, bit of levator scapula. No. We just want this flap of tissue right here as it goes right up to the base of the head. And if I ask my partner to just raise his head off the face cradle just about an inch or so, that's great. I can really feel that tissue contract, very superficial, right on the top of the neck. And then relax, and I can follow this edge all the way down to that lateral clavicle. So that right there is the upper portion of your trapezius. Then, to find the middle fibers, I'm going to just ask my partner to raise his elbow just off the table a bit, and there we can see a great example of those middle fibers spanning across this way, right above the rhomboids. And if I set my fingers on them as he's engaging, there we can really feel those fibers as they run this way, like so. Good, go ahead and relax. And finally, the lower fibers of the trapezius can be engaged by, go ahead and bring your arms just straight out in front of you like Superman, sort of holding them out there. And as he holds his arm out there, the lower fibers of the trapezius contract to stabilize the scapula. And there we can see a nice line, that edge of the lower fibers of the trap. And while he's contracting, just going to roll my fingers across them here. They're very palpable and superficial. And you can see where they head right down to that spinous process of T12 where we were palpating before. Good. Go ahead and relax. So finally, I can shorten and lengthen portions of the trapezius in different ways. The upper fibers and the lower fibers are antagonists. So the upper fibers elevate the scapula while the lower fibers depress the scapula. So if I wanted to shorten the upper fibers, I'm going to elevate the scapula, which lengthens the lower fibers. And conversely, if I want to shorten the lower fibers, I can depress the scapula, and that lengthens the upper fibers. And finally, to shorten the middle fibers, I can scoop the shoulder and adduct the shoulder closer to the spine, just like so. And that's your trapezius. Very thin, very superficial, but very accessible.